Now people are feeling that we're more and more living in a police state, where people are being arrested, convicted on their own doorstep, and they understand, just as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said that the Muslim Ummah, the Muslim nation, is one nation, its land is one, and its war is one, and its honor is one. We are at a stage now, is where I think we're at the peak of the battle now, between Islam and non-Islam. When I say that battle between Islam and non-Islam, I'm not talking about me versus you, or Muslims versus non-Muslims on a street, or terrorism or bombings or anything like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where there's more and more transparency, a conflict between an ideology of Islam and an ideology of freedom, democracy, secularism, whatever you want to call it. That battle of hearts and minds is at its peak now. I think what takes place over the next 5 years or 10 years in places like Afghanistan, wherever the British government and the Americans, they're able to win the hearts and the minds of the Muslims there, meaning make them secular, make them turn their back away from the religion, then that is going to decide a lot about the position of where Britain and America and Europe is going in terms of their own future for Western democracy. Not just abroad, about securing their vested interests, but more about their own interests and their own civilization or culture, whatever you want to call it, on their own doorstep. You see, the thing is, look, the truth is never with one person. The truth is always with God and His Messenger. Yeah? And Allah, He would never allow the message to be wiped out. Allah said that they wish to wipe out the nur of Islam, the light of Islam. But Allah, He would never allow that to happen. But now everybody's become a terrorist. Everybody is a terrorist in one way or another. The only thing that's changed is the definition of what is a terrorist. Terrorism now, I believe, has become the fashion of the 21st century. Everybody loves it. Everybody becomes a terrorist. You're a terrorist. I'm a terrorist as well. The media are journalists. The media, they're terrorists as well. The government, the policymakers, they were terrorists as well. Terrorism meaning fighting or stepping on somebody else's toes in order to propagate their own religion or their own ideology. That's why we believe that the believers, they always struggle and they fight for the sake of God, and the disbelievers, they will always fight for the sake of Tawhut. Tawhut means any false god. The head of that false god today is democracy and freedom. So that battle is being fought now, and more Muslims are waking up and realizing that we are always in one camp, away from the camp of disbelief. More Muslim youth are waking up to their Islamic identity and waking up and realizing, hold on, my name's not Mo, my name's Muhammad. I have an identity, and there is a certain place where I'll place my allegiance, and that is not down to Bin Laden. That is not down to Osama bin Laden making a plea to the Muslims, you choose, you're either with us or you're either with them. Even though that's what he said, that's what George Bush said, you're either with us or you're either with them. But it is the alienation of the British government towards the Muslim community within the West, where they're forcing Muslims to take up ideas like integration, multiculturalism, the banning of the niqab, the whole media crusade and the government crusade, the ideological crusade within the West, is leading to a birth of people who want to see Islam being implemented everywhere. It's more and more apparent now where there's a polarization towards the camp of Islam that is a battle between two ideologies, and there's those two ideologies, they cannot coexist. You know, when you talk about like bombings and stuff, you know, Islam prohibits targeting innocent women, innocent children, yeah? But somebody who's got, you know, who's a mature Muslim male living inside a Muslim land, some American comes and points a gun to his head, you're not going to turn the other cheek, you know what I mean?
That's terrorism. That's terrorism as well, isn't it?
You can call it terrorism. It could be, you know, one man's terrorism is another man's freedom fighter, yeah? But as far as he's concerned, he's fighting for the sake of preserving his life and the sanctity of his people. That's why I said there's terrorism pro-God, pro-life, and there's terrorism against God and against life. So where myself, I don't encourage violent terrorism as in like bombings or killings or suicide attacks or anything like that. But what I definitely encourage is ideological jihad. Because I believe ideological jihad, meaning preserve the system of Islam as an ideology. I think if we can preserve that as a Muslim community worldwide, as a global community, then there is no need for people to strap a bomb on themselves and feel so frustrated and go block places like marketplaces and kill, you know, innocent women and children. Some of these bombings that recently we hear about now in Pakistan taking place in the marketplaces, I believe they're all, American plots. You know,
really?
American plots, yeah.
They justify it on their videos. They justify it.
No, people like Taliban and Al Qaeda, they completely, if they want to claim responsibility for something, they don't shy away from claiming responsibility for something. They're not people who are liars either. So whenever they see something which they know is against Islam, for example, to blow up a mosque, that's not allowed. To blow up a marketplace, that's not allowed. You see. But as far as they're concerned, not according to me, I'm just telling you from their perspective, as far as what they believe is, if there's somebody who comes to fight them, then they will defend themselves. Whether you want to call that terrorism, whether you want to believe the media lies of these people are just strapping bombs and just leaving bombs inside schools and targeting women and children, it's another story altogether. But I never believed the media in the first place. I believe they were a bunch of liars. Of course, when we say ideological jihad, what do we mean by ideological jihad?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean defending Islam as an ideology, meaning stuff like the niqab, meaning the freedom which God has given me to practice my belief, meaning the freedom for me to propagate Islam. Defending Islam, it means to uphold the Islamic values and to propagate them and to present them not as an alternative but a commandment from God Almighty towards anybody who's non-Muslim, to offer that as an alternative, and then and even to go as far as to say that, hold on a minute, we don't need to be at war with each other, even though I'm saying ideological jihad. But that ideological jihad can mean that we get rid of these people like Obama, that we get rid of people like Cameron and all of these puppet regimes, and let us live side by side as we have in the past and live in peace and security. It's not a wish of a Muslim to go and to see non-Muslims killed or anything like that. Our wishes are never that. Our wishes, as a da'i, as somebody who wants to propagate Islam, our wishes are always for the non-Muslims to be guided to the deen of truth. And if not, then you can live by whatever you live by, but let us live in a state of peace and security. We were living side by side fine in this country post 9/11 and post 7/7, but we can't blame the situation where we're at each other's throats now at the hands of Bin Laden or Al-Qaeda or Taliban. Terrorism didn't begin on 9/11. Terrorism began many decades ago when these regimes like the British and the Americans put these dictators in our own countries. That is why people who are sympathetic towards the jihad, they feel so frustrated because they can't get rid of the puppets. So the way they understand things is, look, if you try to grab the puppet will run away. But if you slap the master, the puppet will fall. So this is how Bin Laden thinks. This is how Al-Qaeda thinks. If the British government, if the American government were that serious, which they're not really serious in trying to wipe out terrorism, then they would step down from their position. You see, we always said as a Muslim, I've said this before, I'll tell you again, I believe that I live under a covenant of security. I will never target the life, the wealth, the property of any non-Muslim, but I will always expose the British government. I will always encourage towards exposing their foreign policy and their domestic policies. But the British government doesn't do any favors by arresting radical preachers, who never ever call for any violence. You will never find any speech of Sheikh Abu Hamza where he called for bloodshed on the streets of London. Quite on the contrary, quite the opposite. His anger was always targeted towards governments, policymakers here, as well as those dictators abroad. And it's no different today. This is the thing, we need to understand, look, I'm just a human being, you're just a human being. We got our own lives to live. You and me are going to die, and these regimes, they're still going to exist. When they die, they leave nothing but tyranny and oppression on the face of the earth. And this is what Allah informs us in the Quran, that whenever man he has authority, or whatever man he makes with his hand, he will do nothing more than spread fasad, meaning corruption upon the earth, tyranny and oppression. Show me one good thing that democracy ever brought to the Muslim lands, let alone to Western countries. People talk about suicide bombings in Iraq or Afghanistan. What about the amount of people who are committing suicide within America every day? People want to talk about, we want to liberate the women of Afghanistan. What about liberating your own women over here who are dying from, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, whose desires are being exploited within the West and being manipulated in order so that Western regimes, Western dictators, and so that the capitalist elite, they can benefit from that and they can get richer and richer.
Feel oppressed here? Do you feel oppressed here in your life, day-to-day life?
Oh yeah, of course. I can't say whatever I want. That's why I always say democracy is hypocrisy. When you say democracy, no democracy can exist without the freedom of buying and selling, the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the personal freedom. I don't have any of that. I can't buy and sell whatever I want. I can't donate money to my brothers abroad because they'll class me as a terrorist. I can't have my own personal freedom where I can go out in the middle of the street, get a megaphone and call people back to the path of God. They'll call me an extremist, and in that case, lock me inside Belmarsh. There's no freedom whatsoever. To talk about oppression now, they'll class you as an extremist. Let's not take the understanding of terrorism, how it's being dictated by Western regimes. Let us define what is terrorism. Terrorism is part of Islam. Terrorism against what? Terrorism against pornography. Terrorism against the ills of society. Terrorism against dictators and regimes. This is what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, which is what they rebelled against, which is what they fought against. They fought against alcohol abuse, about buying and cheating within the marketplace, against regimes, a regime which dictated to people that you should worship your own desires or your own private parts, which is no different from today. They used to have 360 gods during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, inside the Kaaba, within the sacred house. Nowadays we have those 360 gods sitting within Parliament, where man, he dictates to another man on how to live your life. That's why we always say democracy is nothing else than the civilized face of dictatorship. You see, it's nothing but the civilized face of dictatorship, stepping on other people's toes. Forget the Muslims now. Ask anybody who's a non-Muslim now, how do you feel about democracy? Are you satisfied with the government that's been elected? Or we don't even know which government is in charge now. It's a coalition government. You can't get away from this stupid coalition. We've got the coalition in Afghanistan, and we've got the coalition over here. How do you feel about it? They don't say, no, we're against Cameron, we're against Brown. Tell me, throughout the last 50 years, where the majority of the British public have said, you know what, I'm proud of my Prime Minister, and I'm willing to go and die for him. Who in their right mind would want to go and die for this idiot? What was his name? The one who was before Cameron.
Blair.
Brown.
Gordon
Brown, Mr. Bean, complete idiot. Who on earth would want to go and fight for him? Tony Blair, the liar. Nobody. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Nobody has any trust or any faith within any of these regimes or within any of these dictators. And we know that these dictators, look, they only leave power when they die. Yeah, but you and me, we have to learn to try and live side by side, and I believe we can live side by side and we can get along if we go back to the commandment of Allah and we live by His God's laws, and we understand one another. It doesn't mean that I'm here to force you to become a Muslim, or we're here to force Islam down anyone's throat via a gun, but definitely by ideological jihad, we are here to propagate the deen of truth, because we believe it's the truth. And same thing for Christians, they're terrorists as well. Jews, okay, I can't really say that whether they're ideological terrorists, because they can't really convert to becoming a Jew. But anybody, whether he believes his religion is the truth and he wants to propagate that, if we go by that definition of terrorism meaning to call people to one way of life, then everybody's a terrorist one way or another. People just don't know it.